Yeah, I mean, it is obviously a couple of months now since we initiated this discussion. I'm not going to repeat the points I started at the last session, but in essence, this amendment number 5 is about national emissions reduction targets and Ireland leading the way in tackling climate change. And really we were trying to make the point that you can't measure progress unless you have a starting point to reference from, and that's what this amendment seeks to do. Now, as I say, I'm not going to repeat the points I started with, but there are a few things that need to be clarified around this, that it's not an airtight commitment to a 2050 target. Even if what the government are proposing could be construed as such, the government policy is only referencing carbon dioxide and none of the highly dangerous greenhouse gases which we've listed in our amendments. And I think I did point out the last time that in the first 2 decades after its release, methane is 84 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So what we're basically saying is both types of emissions need to be addressed if we really want to effectively reduce the impact of climate change. Now, at committee stage, a whole load of amendments were ruled out of order because they made reference to emissions target reductions, and it was argued, I might say without any supporting detailed documentation at all, that reduction targets cost the Exchequer money, and because opposition TDs can't put forward amendments which cost the Exchequer money, therefore they were ruled out of order. And we don't actually accept that rationale at all, because they're not taking into account the fact that climate change mitigation measures will save the Exchequer a fortune in reality, not to mind that the failure to implement real and lasting climate change mitigation measures is actually going to cost the state billions in damages, as well as potentially wiping out the human race. But by the by, those factors haven't been taken into account by ruling those amendments out of order. And I think if we did want proof of the failure of so-called modern democracy to serve the interests of the public good rather than the self-interest of a political establishment, then I think this argument says it all, because this is incredibly short-sighted what the government are putting forward. Now, at the committee stage, the Minister said setting out such definitions here is completely unnecessary, as both legally binding EU and international instruments establish such matter in a far more comprehensive manner. Now, this stance really is a perfect example of what Peter Mayer saw as the externalisation of policy commitments to non-democratic decision makers. So really what we have unfolding here is politicians divesting themselves of a responsibility for potentially unpopular policy decisions and so on, in order to cushion themselves from potential voter discontent in the future. And it's actually this trend which has been responsible to really a bottoming out of Western democracy, and it's one of the reasons why we have such lack of participation and support for the political establishment across Europe. I think the weakness of the bill is indicative of this process and really of the whole process of neoliberalism itself, where the interests of the market are being put ahead of the interests of the public. And it's precisely as a result of this mentality that we're going to have a continuation of austerity, when really the crisis is demanding that we should have wartime types of investment in the public sector to boost our defences and to achieve and help keeping global temperature below 2 degrees Celsius. That requires massive investment in public transport and so on, but the neoliberal ideology is pointing in a different way, and is really prioritising really the next quarter's GDP's figures ahead of the future of humanity and the need to take society forward. So look, we're moving this amendment based on that and the points made the other day. I think it's critically important that this would be inserted in the bill as it stands.